The sky burned red above the ruined colony. Smoke and dust coiled together, painting the horizon with the color of blood. Ash drifted down like slow snow, settling on metal wreckage and scorched stone. The wind whispered across the bones of the battlefield, carrying the faint crackle of dying fires and the bitter scent of war. Through this silence, a shape moved, massive, winged, and glowing faintly beneath the clouds. The SCIFI pack had arrived. Their ship descended through the haze, a dark, clawed vessel shaped like the dragons that piloted it. Inside, Commander Kravax watched the ground with narrow golden eyes. His armored scales glistened in the light from the burning world below. Around him stood 6 warriors, their spears and rifles ready, their faces hard with fury. They had come for one reason, to find the human who destroyed their hunting clan and vanished into the ruins. But there was more than vengeance in their mission. Kravax's hatchlings had gone missing in that same battle. He had sworn to tear the stars apart if he had to bring them home or avenge them. The human signal is weak but active, hissed one of the soldiers, checking a blinking device. He's alive. Kravax's wings twitched. Then he will die soon, he said coldly. Prepare to land. The ship touched down with a heavy thud on cracked soil. Dust billowed out from under its claws. The pack emerged, spreading their wings slightly to balance in the wind. The colony lay in ruin. Buildings torn open, machinery twisted, the remains of battle scattered across the plain. The human had fought hard to survive here, that much was clear. But no one escaped the SCIFI once they came hunting. They moved silently, following the faint trace of body heat through the debris. The signal led them toward a collapsed structure half buried in ash. It had once been a shelter, its metal doors warped and blackened. The scanner flickered. He's inside, whispered the warrior at Kravax's side. Kravax raised his hand, signaling silence. The only sound was the crackling fire and the crunch of ash underfoot. The commander's heart beat fast. He could almost taste the vengeance in the air. He pictured the human cold, ruthless, the last remnant of a species that had dared to defy the SCIFI empire. But as they approached, something unexpected reached his senses. A strange warmth, different from the human's heat signature, flickered faintly inside the bunker. 2 smaller pulses, rhythmic and calm. Kravax frowned. There are others, he muttered. 2 small forms. Human children? A soldier guessed. Kravax shook his head. No, not human. The pack readied their weapons. The doors of the bunker were half open, held by a bent hinge. A faint orange light glowed from within, firelight. Kravax stepped forward first, crouching low, his massive frame almost scraping the ceiling as he entered. What he saw froze him completely. In the center of the bunker, beside a weak fire, lay a human man. His uniform was torn, his face pale with exhaustion. He was sleeping against a steel crate, one arm limp by his side. His rifle rested nearby, untouched. But what drew every eye were the 2 small shapes resting on his chest. 2 dragon hatchlings, SCIFI young, curled up together, breathing softly in sleep. Their tiny claws pressed against the human's shirt, their tails wrapped around his arm. He wasn't restraining them. He wasn't holding them captive. He was keeping them warm. For a long moment, no one moved. The bunker was utterly silent except for the low pop of the fire. The warriors stared, confusion written on every scaled face. Commander, one whispered in disbelief. That's impossible. Kravax said nothing. His mind roared with questions. How could this human, this enemy, have found SCIFI hatchlings? And why were they alive, unharmed, sleeping as if they trusted him completely? He took a slow step forward, his claws clicking against the floor. The hatchlings stirred slightly at the sound, one opening a sleepy golden eye. It made a soft chirping noise, the kind SCIFI infants made when they felt safe. It looked up at Kravax, and then pressed its head closer to the human's chest, as if for comfort. The sight sent a jolt through him. His claws tightened. The creature's markings were familiar. The curved horns, the bright scale pattern, it was his own blood. His hatchling. His missing child. For the first time since the war began, Kravax felt his throat tighten. "By the stars," he whispered. "My son." One of his soldiers took a step forward, anger flaring. "Commander, he must have taken them. He's using them as bait." Kravax turned sharply, his voice low and dangerous. "Look at them. Do they look afraid?" The soldier hesitated. The hatchlings slept peacefully, their tiny wings twitching in dreams. The human's chest rose and fell in a slow, tired rhythm. The man didn't even stir, unaware of the armed dragons standing over him. His face looked worn, weathered, but not cruel. Kravax lowered his weapon slightly. "This makes no sense," he muttered. "If he harmed them, they would scream the moment we entered." Another soldier hissed. "Then why is he alive? He should be dead already." Kravax's gaze remained fixed on the human. Something in the man's stillness, something in the way the hatchlings rested on him, made Kravax hesitate. The firelight flickered across the human's face, showing faint scars, a patch of blood on his sleeve, and a small pouch of ration crumbs near the fire. It looked like he had been feeding the young. "Scan the area," Kravax ordered quietly. No sudden moves. The warriors obeyed, spreading out, but their hearts weren't in it. Every glance returned to the strange sight before them. One of the hatchlings yawned and shifted its tiny wing, brushing against the human's chin. The man murmured something in his sleep, soft, almost gentle words. "Easy, little one. You're safe now." The words echoed through the bunker, low and human, but filled with something the SCIFI understood perfectly: care. Kravax felt something stir in him he hadn't felt in years. A memory of his mate's voice, soothing their newborns in the nest before the war had taken everything. His anger began to crumble, replaced by confusion, and something dangerously close to respect. He stepped closer, kneeling beside the human. The air was warm near the fire, carrying the scent of smoke and iron. He studied the man's face, rough, sunburned, with dark hair streaked with ash. Not a monster. Not the soulless killer he had expected. Just a soldier who had lost too much. Kravax's claws hovered inches from the human's throat. One strike and it would be over. One motion and vengeance would be fulfilled. But he couldn't do it. The hatchlings made a soft noise, curling tighter against the human's chest. One of them chirped again, calling to him, to their father. Kravax's vision blurred slightly. The war, the hatred, the blood. It all felt distant now, like smoke blown away by wind. All that mattered was that his children were alive, breathing, and that this human had kept them that way. He slowly lowered his hand. Behind him, a soldier whispered, "Commander, what do we do?" Kravax stared at the human for a long moment before answering. His voice was quiet, heavy with something none of them had ever heard from him before. "We wait." The pack exchanged glances but obeyed. Weapons lowered. The fire crackled softly. The human slept on, unaware that death had entered his shelter, and chosen not to strike. Kravax stood motionless in the dim light, torn between rage and gratitude. His mind raced with questions. How had this happened? Why would an enemy protect his children instead of killing them? And what kind of man does that, on a world where every reason told him not to? Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. The red light dimmed as night fell over the ruined colony. Inside the bunker, the strange peace held. Kravax took one last look at his sleeping hatchlings, then turned his eyes back to the human. The fire's glow reflected in his golden gaze as he whispered to himself, almost in disbelief, "Why would he protect them?" The words hung in the air like smoke, unanswered and heavy, marking the moment when hatred began to break, and something far greater took its place. The sound of thunder rolled across the sky, though no rain came, only ash fell. The red clouds above the colony glowed faintly with lightning from distant storms, flashing over the broken landscape like the heartbeat of a dying world. Inside the bunker, the fire had nearly burned out. The air was still, heavy with smoke and silence. The human, Elias Ward, stirred faintly, unaware of the dragon warriors standing only a few steps away. Kravax did not move. His claws rested against the cold floor, his golden eyes locked on the sleeping man. The two hatchlings still lay against Elias's chest, one of them occasionally twitching its small tail. The sight pulled at the commander's mind, tearing open memories he had tried to bury. He could still remember the night of the battle, the flames, the screams, the loss. He had led his pack with pride. The SCIFI Empire had declared war on humanity after a dispute over territory near the fringe colonies. The humans were clever, dangerous, but fragile, or so the Empire had believed. The war was meant to be swift. Instead, it had turned into a storm that no one could control. Kravax's memory blurred as he stared at the human. He could still see the explosions across the valley, the humans refusing to retreat, the courage in their eyes as they fought hopeless odds. The SCIFI had respected strength, but humans had shown something stranger, something beyond strength. They fought not for empire or conquest, but for each other. And now here was proof of it again, lying before him. A man who should have been his enemy had chosen to protect his children. Elias woke slowly. His eyes blinked open, cloudy from exhaustion. For a moment he didn't see them. He just looked around, confused, as if waking from a dream. Then his gaze landed on Kravax. The human froze. His body tensed instantly, his hand twitching toward his rifle. But then he stopped when he noticed the hatchling still sleeping on his chest. He didn't move, didn't even breathe for a moment. Kravax saw the awareness in the man's eyes, the sharp soldier's instinct, the fear held in check. But there was no hatred there, no panic, only understanding. The human knew exactly what was happening. "If you're going to kill me," Elias said quietly, his voice dry and hoarse, "don't wake them." The bunker went silent. The SCIFI warriors glanced at one another, startled. No one had expected him to speak like that. No begging, no anger, just calm acceptance, and a strange protectiveness that confused them even more. Kravax stepped closer, towering over the human. "Why?" he demanded in a deep growl. "Why protect what is not yours?" Elias looked up at him, tired eyes steady. "Because they were alone," he said simply. "And I couldn't leave them to die." One of the warriors hissed. "They are our hatchlings. You dare touch." "Enough," Kravax snapped, silencing his soldier with a glance. He studied the human again. "You expect me to believe you saved them out of mercy? A human?" Elias gave a faint, humorless smile. "Call it whatever you want. I just couldn't stand hearing them cry." He shifted slightly, careful not to disturb the hatchlings. The firelight revealed the bruises on his arms, the burns on his hands, and the makeshift bandages tied with strips of his own uniform. He looked half dead, but the hatchlings were clean, fed, and unharmed. Kravax crouched lower, his tail scraping the floor. "How long have you kept them?" 6 days, Elias said. "Since the battle. I found them under a collapsed drone tank. Their nest was gone. I thought they'd die before morning." He paused, his voice softer now. "I wasn't going to let that happen." The dragons exchanged uneasy glances. It was unthinkable, an enemy soldier caring for their young. Yet the evidence lay before them, undeniable. "Why not use them?" Kravax asked, testing him. "Trade them for your life, for food, for a way off this world." Elias shook his head. "What kind of man does that?" he said quietly. "I've seen too much of what war makes us. I didn't want to be that." Something inside Kravax shifted at those words. For years he had believed humans were monsters, clever, cold, manipulative. But this one spoke like he understood the weight of every life around him, even alien ones. The commander's gaze drifted to the hatchlings again. They were his own blood, his family. If the human had left them, they would have perished in the cold. Instead, they looked strong, healthy. "Your people slaughtered ours," Kravax said, his voice low, almost uncertain. "You burned our nests on Threx 9. Why save these?" Elias looked into the fire. "Because someone has to stop the killing somewhere," he said. "Even if it's just me." No one spoke after that. The fire hissed as the last of the wood turned to ash. Outside, lightning flashed again. lighting the sky through the cracks in the ceiling. Kravax turned to his warriors. "Stand down," he ordered quietly. They hesitated, uncertain. "Commander, he is still human. Do as I say." They obeyed, lowering their weapons, though confusion rippled through them. Elias slowly reached out and adjusted the blanket he had made from a torn emergency sheet, covering the hatchlings more fully. His movements were slow, careful, almost tender. The dragons watched in silence as he murmured softly, "You're safe now, little ones." Kravax felt the words echo deep inside him. He didn't understand this human, but he couldn't deny the truth in front of his eyes. He had lost everything. His mate, his home, and yet fate had placed this enemy before him, caring for what was left of his family. The commander finally spoke again. "What do you want, human?" Elias looked up at him. "Nothing," he said honestly. "I'm not your prisoner. I'm not your friend. I'm just a man trying to do one good thing before this war finishes me." Kravax stared at him for a long moment. There was no deceit in his eyes, no hidden trick. Only exhaustion and quiet conviction. One of the hatchlings stirred, letting out a small squeak. Elias smiled faintly. "They like the warmth," he said softly. "You dragons run colder than we do." Kravax blinked in surprise. It was a simple comment, yet it felt strange, like a bridge between enemies that wasn't supposed to exist. Outside, a distant explosion echoed through the valley. The ground trembled faintly. Kravax's comm unit flickered with static. Another SCIFI fleet was entering orbit, searching for survivors. "Others are coming," one of the warriors warned. "If they find him here, they will kill him," Kravax finished grimly. He knew his own empire. They would not tolerate mercy toward an enemy, no matter what he had done. Elias seemed to understand without needing to ask. "Then I guess this is where it ends," he said quietly. Kravax's claws flexed. He didn't answer. He didn't know what to say. Everything about this situation broke the laws of his kind. He had come to kill a human, and instead found the only one who had shown kindness to his blood. He stood there for a long time, his mind torn between duty and something far deeper. The war had taught him that mercy was weakness. But as he looked at the hatchlings sleeping peacefully, he began to wonder if mercy was the only strength left that still mattered. The fire finally went out, leaving the bunker lit only by the soft glow of emergency lights. Elias leaned back, eyes half closed, too tired to fight, too calm to fear. Kravax watched him, saying nothing. Outside, the red sky rumbled again. The storm was coming closer. Kravax turned to his soldiers, his voice low and hard. "No one touches him. Not until I decide." The pack obeyed, confused but silent. As they stood guard in the shadows, the commander's thoughts burned. What would he do when the reinforcements arrived? Hand the human over for execution, or protect him for saving his children? The war outside raged on. But inside that small bunker, something had already begun to change. And Kravax, warrior, killer, commander, found himself afraid for the first time. Not of death, but of what his choice would mean for everything he had ever believed. The storm finally broke over the ruins, sweeping dust and smoke through the shattered colony. Lightning ripped across the red clouds, throwing long shadows through the broken walls. The air trembled with thunder. Inside the bunker, the fire was gone, leaving only faint warmth and the dim red glow of the emergency light. Kravax stood near the entrance, his massive wings folded tight, his golden eyes watching the sleeping human and the two hatchlings he had once believed dead. For hours, no one spoke. The SCIFI warriors waited for their commander's decision, their claws tightening on their weapons. They had come here for blood, an easy kill, a human to slaughter in the name of vengeance. Now their leader stood silent, lost in thought. When the first streaks of light touched the sky, Kravax finally moved. "We cannot stay," he said quietly. His voice, though calm, carried the weight of command. "Another patrol will be here soon," one of his soldiers hissed. "Then we finish this before they arrive. We kill him, take the hatchlings, and leave." Kravax turned, his gaze sharp as a blade. If you raise a weapon against him again, I will end you myself. The soldier froze. The others lowered their heads. None dared to challenge their commander again. Elias stirred at the sound. He blinked awake slowly, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. For a moment he didn't remember where he was. Then his gaze fell on the group of scaled figures surrounding him. The hatchlings still slept on his chest, their small claws gripping his torn jacket. "Still here?" he said softly, his voice dry with exhaustion. "Didn't think I'd make it through the night." Kravax stepped closer. "You should not have." Elias gave a faint smile. "I could say the same to your kids." The commander's expression didn't change, but his tail flicked once, a subtle sign of unease. "They are alive because of you," he said. "But that does not mean you are safe." "I didn't expect to be," Elias said simply. "I just did what I had to do." He looked down at the hatchlings, then back up at the towering alien. "They trusted me," he added quietly. "That's not something you betray." Kravax studied him for a long moment, searching for deception, and found none. Every word came from something genuine. The human's voice was calm, but beneath it ran a deep, quiet strength. Outside, the thunder grew louder. The ground trembled faintly as the distant hum of approaching engines reached their ears. Another SCIFI transport ship. "Commander," one of the warriors said quickly, "we must go. The fleet will detect us if we stay. And if they find him alive." Kravax's jaw tightened. He knew the truth. If their superiors learned he had spared a human, he would be executed. Yet the thought of killing this man made his claws tremble. The humans saw the hesitation in his eyes. "They're your people, aren't they?" he said quietly. "Your family?" Kravax nodded once. "My hatchlings. My blood." Elias looked down at them and smiled faintly. "Then they're lucky. You found them." The words hit Kravax harder than he expected. Lucky. That word didn't belong in war. Not anymore. The engines grew louder. The warriors looked toward the entrance, restless. "Commander," one urged. "We cannot let them see us with him." Kravax growled low. "Then hide." He moved toward the door, wings unfolding slightly. Outside, the horizon glowed faintly with the light of approaching ships. The storm made the air thick and hazy, distorting the outlines of everything. Kravax could see the glint of metal high above, scout drones sweeping the ruins. He turned back to Elias. "You must stay silent," he said. "Do not move, do not speak." Elias nodded once. "You're protecting me?" Kravax's voice dropped to a growl. "I am protecting them." He gestured toward the hatchlings. "If they learn a human saved them, they will kill you and burn this place to ash. And they will take my children for study." Elias frowned. "So what do you do now? Keep standing between both sides until someone shoots you?" Kravax didn't answer. Instead, he motioned to his warriors. "Seal the entrance. No sound leaves this bunker." They obeyed quickly, stacking debris against the door. The noise outside grew louder. Voices, engines, the metallic whine of landing craft. Elias looked at the commander, confusion mixing with curiosity. "You could have just let them find me. End of problem." Kravax turned his gaze on him, eyes glowing faintly in the red light. "You saved what I love most," he said. "The least I can do is keep you breathing a little longer." A faint smile tugged at Elias's mouth. "That's one way to say thank you." For a brief moment, something like dry humor crossed the dragon's face, so faint that only Elias caught it. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. A shadow moved outside the bunker entrance. Voices echoed faintly, SRF soldiers searching the ruins. Kravax pressed a clawed finger to his lips, signaling silence. The human didn't move. A moment later, the metal door shuddered. The sound of claws scraping on the outer hull filled the bunker. Elias's hand crept toward his weapon, but Kravax raised one claw, warning him not to draw it. The voices outside faded again. The patrol was moving on. Kravax let out a slow breath. When the sound finally vanished into the storm, he turned back to the human. "You should not be alive," he said softly. And yet, something tells me you're meant to be. Elias met his gaze. Maybe both our species need a reason to stop killing everything that moves. The words hung in the air like a quiet challenge. Kravax didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned toward the hatchlings. They had woken during the noise, blinking their small golden eyes. One of them made a soft chirping sound and reached toward the commander. Kravax bent down, his massive hand trembling slightly as he brushed a claw gently against his child's head. The hatchling chirped again, then looked at Elias and let out a happy squeak, as if asking for him to come closer. The human chuckled softly. Looks like they don't care about war either. Kravax felt his throat tighten. They are too young to understand hate, he said. Perhaps that is why they still have a future. Elias nodded slowly. Then make sure they keep it. A sudden burst of static interrupted the moment. Kravax's communicator crackled to life. A deep voice filled the bunker. Commander Kravax, report. Have you located the human target? The pack froze. Every eye turned to Kravax. He hesitated for a heartbeat, then pressed the comm switch. No, he said firmly. No life signs detected. The ruins are empty. The voice replied, sharp and suspicious. Negative reading, Commander. Satellite scans show heat signatures in your sector. Kravax's heart pounded. Residual heat from the battle, he lied. No survivors. A long pause followed. Then the voice responded. Understood. Return to orbit when your sweep is complete. The signal cut out. The bunker was silent again except for the soft breathing of the hatchlings. Elias exhaled slowly. You just lied to your own command, he said quietly. Kravax's eyes narrowed. I did what needed to be done. You're risking everything, Elias said. Your rank, your life. I have already lost everything, Kravax interrupted. If this war takes one more innocent, then what honor is left to protect? The words hung heavy in the still air. Elias looked at him, realizing this creature, this warrior, was more than the monster he'd been trained to hate. Outside, the storm began to fade. The light through the cracks softened from red to gray. The danger had passed for now. Elias shifted carefully, pulling the blanket up over the hatchlings. So what happens next? He asked. Kravax looked toward the fading storm. The war continues, he said grimly. But I will not let them find you. You will live until I decide otherwise. Elias smiled faintly. Sounds fair. For now. Kravax didn't reply. He turned toward the exit, wings tightening around his armor. But as he glanced back one last time, he saw the hatchlings curl closer to the human again, completely unafraid. The commander's heart clenched. He didn't know what this strange bond meant yet, but he knew one thing for certain. The moment he had spared this man, the war inside him had begun. And when it ended, nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. The morning after the storm was silent. The ash that had choked the air now lay still across the ground like a gray ocean. The wreckage of ships and burned metal shimmered faintly in the light of the rising sun. Inside the bunker, the air was heavy with the smell of smoke, metal, and something new, uneasy peace. Elias Ward sat beside the dying fire, one hand resting gently on the hatchlings. They had woken early, chirping softly, climbing up his arm as though he were one of their own. He smiled faintly despite his exhaustion. For 6 days he had fought to keep them alive, feeding them from his ration bars, melting water for them, shielding them from scavengers. They had become his reason to keep breathing when hope had already left him. Across the room, Commander Kravax watched in silence. The human's gentleness unsettled him. Elias moved with the kind of care a SCIFI parent would give their young. It was not a trick, not a ploy. Kravax had seen deception 1,000 times before, but this wasn't it. This was something else. Do they know who you are? Elias asked suddenly, his eyes still on the hatchlings. Kravax blinked, surprised by the question. They do. They smell my blood in theirs. Elias nodded slowly. Then they'll remember you. The commander tilted his head. You speak as if you know what that means. I do, Elias said. I had a daughter once. The words hung in the air, quiet and heavy. The dragons shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to look away. Elias didn't notice. His eyes had turned distant, fixed on the dim glow of the fire. She was 8 when the war began, he continued softly. Her mother took her to the shelters when the first bombardments hit. I never saw them again. Kravax said nothing, but the muscles in his jaw tightened. He understood loss far better than he ever wanted to. I kept fighting because I thought revenge would make the pain smaller, Elias said. It didn't. It just made the world emptier. The words sank into Kravax like shards of truth. For the first time, he saw his reflection in this human's grief. 2 enemies shaped by the same wound. Finally, Kravax spoke. You saved my hatchlings. You cared for them as if they were your own. Why? Elias looked up at him, his voice steady but soft. Because someone has to break the chain. Someone has to stop the war from swallowing everything. Kravax's eyes narrowed. You think one man can change that? Maybe not, Elias said. But I can change what's right in front of me. The hatchlings chirped softly, curling closer to his arm. Kravax felt the weight of the moment pressing against his heart. His instincts told him to take them back to the pack ship, to report the truth, to let the Empire handle this, but his soul screamed against it. The Empire would not see this human as a savior. They would see him as an experiment, a threat, a story that needed to be erased. Before he could answer, his comm device flared again. A new voice came through, gravelly impatient. Commander Kravax, status report. We have received conflicting readings. You were to return hours ago. Kravax hesitated. His warriors glanced at him nervously. He pressed the comm slowly. Our engines were damaged in the storm. We are conducting final scans. Understood, the voice said coldly. We are dispatching a recovery unit to your coordinates. 15 minutes. The line went dead. Elias exhaled. 15 minutes, he said quietly. That's not much time. Kravax turned to his soldiers. Prepare the hatchlings for transport, he ordered. The dragons obeyed without question, gently gathering the small creatures. The hatchlings squirmed, letting out small distressed noises. They reached for Elias as they were lifted away. Kravax saw it, and something twisted inside him. The human raised a hand, his voice calm but filled with quiet sorrow. Easy, little ones, he said softly. You're going home now. The hatchlings chirped in confusion. One of them tried to wriggle back toward him. Elias looked at Kravax. If they stay with me when your people arrive, you'll lose them. You know that. I do, Kravax said. His voice was low, heavy with something that felt almost like guilt. Elias stood up slowly. Then promise me one thing. Kravax frowned. Promise you. Promise me you'll keep them safe, Elias said. Don't let your empire turn them into weapons. Don't let them grow up believing the only thing they can do is kill humans. Kravax stared at him, silent for a long time. You ask much of me. I'm not asking, Elias said. I'm trusting you. That word, trust, made something inside Kravax crack. No one had ever spoken it to him like that, not even among his own kind. Trust was a fragile thing in war, rarer than peace itself. And here it was, offered freely by the one being he should have hated most. Outside, the sound of engines drew closer. The rescue ship was almost there. Kravax turned away from Elias, speaking to his soldiers. You will not mention the human to anyone. Do you understand? They hesitated. Commander, that is an order, he snapped. His voice carried enough fire to silence them instantly. He looked back at Elias. They will find the bunker. When they do, they will scan for heat signatures. You must be gone by then. Elias gave a tired half-smile. And where exactly do you suggest I go? Kravax reached into a compartment on his armor and pulled out a small metallic disc. This beacon, he said, handing it to the human. It transmits to no SCIFI frequency. It's human tech, recovered from your fallen. Use it. Someone will come for you. Elias took it carefully, his fingers brushing against the alien's scaled hand. You're risking a lot. Kravax gave a low growl that almost sounded like laughter. I'm already lost to my empire. A few more lies will not change that. The hatchlings cried softly as the warriors prepared to leave. Kravax lifted one into his arms. It chirped once, pressing its tiny head against his chest. The other still reached toward Elias, as if it didn't understand why the warmth of safety was being taken away. Elias crouched and whispered softly, "It's okay, little one. You're safe now. Don't forget that." When he looked up, his eyes met Kravax's. "If we ever meet again," Elias said, "I hope it's not as enemies." Kravax nodded once. "If we meet again," he replied, "it will not be under the flag of war." Outside, the engines roared louder. The air trembled. Kravax turned to leave, his wings folding close around the hatchlings. His warriors followed, disappearing into the red haze. Elias watched them go, the wind whipping through the cracks in the walls. When the sound of their ship lifted into the sky, he was alone again. Alone, but not the same man he had been before. He looked down at the small beacon in his hand. It blinked faintly, a single pulse of light in the gray ruin. Promise. He pressed it once, watching the signal begin to transmit, then leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to feel something close to peace. Far above the clouds, Kravax's ship broke through the atmosphere, carrying 2 hatchlings and a secret that could destroy him if the Empire ever learned the truth. He looked down at the world fading beneath them, the war-torn colony shrinking into nothing but dust. Beside him, his youngest hatchling chirped softly, curling up against his arm. Kravax's gaze softened. "Sleep," he whispered. "You're safe now." But in his heart, he knew safety was only an illusion. The Empire would come again. They always did. And when they did, he would have to decide between duty and the promise he had just made to a human. 2 weeks had passed since the storm over the scorched valley, but the memory still burned like fire in Commander Kravax's mind. The Empire had sent a recovery ship, just as promised, and he had returned with his hatchlings. Alive, unharmed, and carrying a secret that could never be told. The moment he stepped back aboard the fleet carrier Vornitha's Claw, the air felt heavier, colder, filled with suspicion and silent questions. His warriors followed his orders without hesitation, but even they could sense that something had changed within their commander. He stood now in the dim war chamber, surrounded by holographic projections of star systems and glowing crimson tactical grids. The Empire's insignia pulsed on the walls like a living heart. Grand Chancellor Vradan's image loomed above the table, a towering dragon whose scales shimmered like molten steel, his voice sharp and heavy with authority. "Commander Kravax," Vradan said, his tone filled with quiet menace. "You reported that the human outpost was destroyed, yet our sensors recorded human signals long after your transmission. Explain." Kravax's throat tightened. He had prepared for this moment. "Residual transmissions, Chancellor, likely from damaged human equipment. The colony was reduced to ash. No life survived." Vradan studied him, eyes narrowing. "And your hatchlings? You were fortunate to recover them." "They were found in a collapsed bunker. The human munitions detonated nearby," Kravax replied smoothly, though every word felt like walking on glass. "They survived by chance." The Chancellor leaned closer, the holographic glow casting deep shadows across his fanged mouth. "Chance," he repeated slowly, "or providence. Perhaps both." His gaze burned into Kravax. "You are a loyal son of the Empire. I trust your report is complete." Kravax met his stare and gave a slow bow. "It is." "Good," Vradan said. "Then prepare your fleet. The Council has decided the SCIFI Empire will move on the remaining human sectors. The time for mercy is over." Kravax froze. His claws dug into the metal floor beneath him. "You intend to launch a full invasion?" "Yes," the Chancellor said, voice cold as stone. "The humans have grown bold. Their fleets expand beyond their own systems. It is time to remind them who rules this galaxy." The hologram flickered out, leaving Kravax in silence. Around him, his officers murmured with excitement, speaking of conquest and glory, but Kravax felt only dread. He saw again the image burned into his mind, of Elias Ward sitting beside the fire, the hatchling sleeping peacefully on his chest. That human had risked his life for the innocent. That same human would soon face the wrath of an empire built on vengeance. He turned away from the room and strode down the corridor, his wings brushing against the metal walls. The ship's hum echoed in his ears like a heartbeat. In the nursery chamber, his two hatchlings lay nestled together, breathing softly. They had grown stronger in the last weeks, their scales beginning to shimmer with the faint red hue of their kind. But when Kravax approached, one of them stirred and chirped, a sound that made his chest ache. It was the same sound it had made when it reached for Elias. Kravax sat down slowly, resting his armored claws on the cold floor. "You remember him, don't you?" he whispered. "The human." The hatchling tilted its head, then pressed against his hand as if in answer. He sighed deeply, his thoughts torn apart. He had made a promise to keep them safe, to keep them from becoming weapons. Yet the Empire's shadow was already reaching for them. Once the war began again, there would be no place in the galaxy where peace could survive. He rose suddenly, his decision forming like lightning in his mind. He opened a secure comm channel, one not registered with the Empire's systems. "This is Commander Kravax, personal encryption channel," he said softly. "Requesting access to black archives, classified human transmissions, recent sector logs." The terminal blinked. Then came a faint voice through static. "Access granted, Commander. Uploading data." Lines of information flooded the screen, coordinates, distress calls, encrypted signals. And then, there it was. A faint pulse, barely detectable, but familiar. A beacon, human origin, broadcasting from the ruins of the same colony he had left behind. Elias Ward was alive. Kravax's heart thundered. The Empire believed the planet dead, erased, but the signal told another story. The human had survived, and worse, the Empire scouts would soon rediscover the site. He turned sharply toward his guards. "Prepare my personal shuttle," he ordered. "I am leaving immediately." One of his lieutenants blinked in confusion. "Commander? But the Chancellor's orders." "Do not question me," Kravax growled. His wings unfurled slightly, casting a shadow across the room. "Tell the Council I am pursuing intelligence from the human network. No one follows me. No one." Within minutes, the sleek black shuttle detached from Vornitha's claw, disappearing into the emptiness between stars. The Empire's fleet continued to gather, its war engines roaring to life. But Kravax flew the other way, toward a dead world and a promise he could no longer ignore. The journey was long and silent. As the shuttle pierced the gray clouds of the ruined colony, lightning flared below. The landscape was worse than before. Whole fields turned to glass, craters still glowing faintly with radiation. Yet as he descended near the bunker, his scanners confirmed it. Life signs, faint but steady. He stepped out into the cold wind, his armor streaked with red dust. The bunker door was half collapsed, buried under rubble. He pushed it aside with one powerful sweep, the metal shrieking as it gave way. Inside, Elias Ward stirred weakly, blinking against the light. His face was pale, his clothes torn, but his eyes were steady. "Took you long enough," he said hoarsely. Kravax stood in the doorway, half in shadow. "You're alive," he said quietly. "Barely," Elias replied. "Your empire doesn't leave much standing." Kravax stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "They're preparing for war, a full invasion of human space." Elias laughed softly, though it sounded more like a cough. "Then you came here to finish what they started?" "No," Kravax said firmly. "I came because I made a promise." The human studied him for a long moment. The faintest smile touched his lips. "You really are full of surprises." Kravax glanced toward the entrance. "We must move. My ship can take you to the outer sectors, beyond the Empire's reach. But once they know you're alive, they'll come for you again." Elias pushed himself up slowly, pain in every movement. Then I guess we better not let them find me. As they stepped out into the storm together, the red sky stretched wide above them, filled with thunder and memory. Kravax looked at the man beside him, this fragile, stubborn human who refused to die, and felt something stir inside him that he hadn't known in years. Hope. He didn't know where this road would lead, whether to redemption or ruin, but for the first time he was willing to find out. Above them, the Empire's warships began to move across the stars. And somewhere deep within the void, a single message echoed from the ruins of the old world, a signal that would change the fate of two species forever. The shuttle broke through the clouds at dawn, slicing past the blood-red light of the rising sun. The storm had passed, but the world below was still half dead. Smoking fields, cracked glass plains, and mountains that glowed faintly where plasma bombs had burned their marks. Yet among the ruins, something new shimmered in the distance. A faint signal, pulsing in rhythm like a heartbeat. Elias Ward sat in the co-pilot's seat, pale but steady, watching the horizon with cautious eyes. His face was drawn, the exhaustion carved deep, but there was a strange calm behind it. He'd already seen too much death to be shaken easily anymore. Beside him, Commander Kravax piloted in silence, his massive form hunched forward, claws gripping the controls. The hum of the engines filled the quiet space between them. "Where are we going?" Elias asked finally, his voice low. "To a place my people forgot," Kravax replied. "An old colony from before the Empire's rise. It was abandoned centuries ago, no scanners, no patrols. You'll be safe there." Elias gave a faint, skeptical smile. "Safe? You really think anywhere in the galaxy is safe now?" Kravax's jaw tightened. "I think it's safer than staying under the Chancellor's eyes." Elias leaned back, staring at the crimson clouds outside. "You could have left me there," he said. "No one would have known. You risked everything coming back." Kravax didn't answer at first. His eyes stayed on the sky, but his mind drifted. He saw again the hatchlings curled beside Elias, the soft sounds they made, the peace in that broken bunker that no empire could understand. He finally said, "I told you before, I don't break promises." Elias looked at him for a long moment. "You're not like the others, are you?" "No," Kravax said softly. "That's the problem." The shuttle trembled as it entered orbit around the hidden world. The planet below was quiet, wrapped in green mist, its surface covered in forests that shimmered silver in the wind. Once it had been a SCIFI research world, a place of healing before the Empire turned science into war. As they landed in a wide clearing, the engines powered down, and the silence that followed felt almost sacred. The hatch opened, letting in clean, untouched air. Elias stepped out first, boots sinking into soft moss. He drew in a deep breath and smiled faintly. "Smells like life," he said. Kravax followed, his wings spreading slightly as if tasting the wind. "It's one of the few places the war never touched." They made camp near a stream, the water running clear and cold. Kravax scanned the area, ensuring no patrol beacons were active. Elias gathered what little supplies they had left, setting a small fire. For a time, neither spoke. They didn't need to. The silence between them was not empty but full, alive with the sound of wind and water and the beating of two hearts that had once belonged to enemies. When Elias finally spoke, his voice was soft. "What will you do now, Kravax? You can't go back. The Empire will call you a traitor." Kravax stared into the fire, the orange glow reflecting in his dark eyes. "I've already betrayed them," he said. "I lied to the Chancellor. I defied my orders. I saved a human." He looked up, his expression unreadable. "There's no path back from that." Elias nodded slowly. "Then maybe that's a good thing." Kravax tilted his head. "Good. Maybe it's time someone stood up," Elias said. "Your people think humans are monsters. Mine think the same of yours. Maybe they're both wrong." The dragon was quiet for a long while. Then, almost to himself, he said, "The Empire doesn't change, Elias. It destroys what it cannot control. The moment they find us, they'll burn this place to ash." Then we make sure they don't find us, Elias said simply. Kravax gave a low rumble, half amusement, half disbelief. You're one human. I'm one exile. What chance do we have against an empire? Elias smiled faintly. Enough to start something. The words hung in the air, small but powerful. Kravax found himself staring at the fire again, imagining his hatchlings. Safe for now, but growing in a world that would teach them hate if he didn't stop it. He turned to Elias. If the Empire launches this invasion, millions will die. Humans. My kind. It won't end until everything is ash. Elias's eyes met his, steady and fierce. Then we stop it before it starts. The sound of their voices was drowned out for a moment by the distant rumble of thunder. But it wasn't thunder. Kravax's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. A faint red light flashed in the distance, cutting through the mist. Patrol ship, he said quickly. They found us. Elias was already on his feet, grabbing his pack. How far? 5 minutes, Kravax said, scanning his wrist display. Maybe less. He rushed to the shuttle and activated the defense grid, old energy cannons emerging from their housings with a metallic hiss. The red light grew stronger, breaking through the trees. A sleek black ship bearing the mark of the SCIFI Empire. Kravax turned to Elias. Get inside the shuttle. Now. I'm not hiding, Elias shot back. This isn't a choice. Kravax roared. They'll kill you the moment they see you. Elias hesitated, but before he could reply, the patrol ship descended, its engines screaming, sending a shockwave through the clearing. The hatch opened and 3 armored soldiers stepped out, their plasma rifles raised. Commander Kravax, one of them barked. By order of the Chancellor, you are to stand down and surrender for questioning. Kravax's claws curled. Questioning, he growled. That means execution. The soldier's visor gleamed. You defied Imperial recall. You have consorted with human remnants. The Council will decide your fate. Elias took a step forward, but Kravax blocked him with one wing. Stay behind me, he said. The soldier raised his weapon. And the human? Kravax's voice dropped to a low snarl. He's under my protection. The soldiers hesitated. Protection? You've lost your mind, Commander. Maybe, Kravax said. Or maybe I found it. Then he moved. The ground shook as he leapt forward, his claws tearing through metal, his wings flaring like fire. Plasma bolts flew, scorching the air, lighting the forest in red flame. Elias ducked for cover, grabbing a fallen rifle from the dirt. The battle was quick but brutal. When it ended, the patrol ship was burning, its hull split open. Kravax stood over the wreckage, chest heaving, smoke rising from his armor. Elias climbed out from the brush, limping slightly. You just declared war on your own empire, he said quietly. Kravax looked at him. No, he said. I just declared I won't serve it anymore. The forest around them glowed faintly from the fires, casting their shadows long and sharp. Elias took a deep breath. Then what now? Kravax looked toward the rising sun, the sky painted red and gold. Now, he said, we build something new. For the first time, Elias smiled. Tired, broken, but real. A human and a dragon building peace, he said. That's one hell of a story. Kravax nodded. Then let's make it true. As the flames dimmed and the wind carried away the smoke, the two figures stood side by side, looking out over the quiet world that had chosen them both. Above, the red sky shimmered, no longer a sign of war, but of something greater, a beginning, promise kept, and the first dawn of peace between two worlds that had only ever known blood.